fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind.
It was basically a cube with inside of a sphere where the points of the cube were touching outside of the sphere.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger. There's troubleshooting machines out here.
So this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
That UFO Podcast is powered by Zencastr. Zencastr is one of the world's leading platforms for recording and hosting podcasts. Zencastr is a modern web-based solution for high-quality audio and video podcast production. With a full suite of professional tools, Zencastr allows podcasters to quickly and seamlessly record their guests remotely and produce their podcasts in studio quality. Check out the links in the show description to find out more. Breaking news, this important public service announcement is brought to you by Manscaped.com. This is your pubic service announcement and the news you've all been waiting for. The Manscaped engineering team has confirmed that they have successfully created the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is now available for purchase in the EU and UK. This new trimmer was just released only moments ago, and we are one of the first to get our hands on it and share the news. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you, 20% off and free shipping with the code ANDYUFO at manscaped.com. I'm one of the first people to try the new 4.0 and I am blown away by the performance. The craftsmanship and details on the 4.0 are next level, generations ahead of where it should be. Their advanced ceramic blade and skin-safe technology is so good that it almost seems as if Manscaped worked with S4 with Bob Lazar and others to ensure your saucers are as safe as possible. What makes this trimmer different from all the other trimmers? Well, a few things for me. A new multifunction on-off switch can engage a travel lot, created for people who like to travel, whichever dimension that might be in. The Lawnmower 4.0 gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. The Phoenix lights have nothing on this. And the new trimmer even allows you to customise your trim overall through additional guard lengths. You get a couple of those included inside the box with sizes 1 to 4. So if it's tall Nordics or short greys, it's all good. And looks wise, it's sleek with a two-tone matte and gloss finish. Even features a hot foil stamped black chrome Manscaped logo. Look at that. That is a nice piece of kit. You know when you take it out of the box and you just feel the weight of it and you just feel it's a quality piece of kit. That is premium right there, the 4.0. Did I mention wireless charging? The Lawnmower 4.0's new wireless charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which can help battery length last longer. If you're still trimming your face with your ball trimmer, it's time to make some changes. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ANDYUFO at manscaped.com. Remember, that's 20% off and free shipping on any products they've got on the website. Thanks, folks. Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast from the archives. This is part 2 of the Roundtable, originally aired last year with Gary Voorhis, Kevin Day and Patrick Hughes. This one was originally broadcast around August 25th, 2020 and was a really interesting talk. The second part focuses on listener questions, including could the pilots and radar have misidentified the craft? We looked at the UAP Task Force and what sort of power it would have, so that's an interesting talk given the report came out, 10 months later after this episode. We look at threat and intent and why did they allow themselves to be seen, and a whole lot more on top of that as well, folks. Enjoy and look out for more from the archive soon. Yeah, I get those. Right, so coming back from that message, folks, we had a ton of listener questions sent over. Thank you very much. And I've narrowed it down to about 4 or 5 pages worth of questions. Some of the other stuff has already been answered within the body of the interview, so thank you very much. And folks, some of the names are Twitter names and whatnot. I'm just going to go through and ask the questions as well, because some of you sent really similar questions in too. So if you think it's your question, it probably is. Let's go with that. First question, can the guys discuss the Navy's CEC radar and how it's impossible to misidentify a plane? I think, PJ, you want to take that one, don't you?
First of all, CEC is not a radar. It stands for Cooperative Engagement Capability, and the layman unclassified version, it is a real-time data link between a bunch of different ships and airplanes. It doesn't have its own information. It pulls information from all the sensors on other ships and here and there. So it's not something you can spoof. It's the glorious thing about it, and it's available on the internet to look up, is that it takes all the stuff it's connected to and makes one giant picture. So you're unlikely to fool it. But the big thing is CEC is not a radar. Got anything to add there, Gary?
Yeah, it also has systems on it that are already written into it that if data doesn't correlate with what it thinks it should be, it will not use it. So like say one of the links was, like one of the links coming from one of the ships was just corrupted. Like, say there was something wrong with the CEC and it was sending a bunch of bad information. It would just drop that link. It doesn't need that link to make the picture. It just needs all of the other links that it has. Basically any one link it's not dependent on. Mm-hmm. So it's cool. It's collaborating the information amongst everything connected to it, and that's how it's making its picture. So with CEC, it can't be spoofed because it's not something to spoof. It's a data link system. It's not a radar.
Cool. No, thanks for that. So next question. Biggest philosophical question has to be intent. Why, with such superior capabilities, have these craft allowed themselves to be seen?
Well, I think starting with our invention of radar, they'd never intended us to see them. I think it's just as our capabilities become more and more advanced, we're just able to see them. It's kind of like before we invented AM and FM radio, we couldn't transmit over those frequencies. We didn't even know they existed, So once we are able to, then it just brings us into another realm of existence.
So to expand on that then, why when Commander Fravor, I'll use the word engaged, that might be wrong, at one of these craft, and as he commented, he came down towards it and it came up towards him, why didn't this thing just shoot off at that point?
Well, probably for the same reason. If I got into a fight with a kid, if I got into an actual fist fight with a kid, I wouldn't hurt him. I wouldn't even, I would just do everything I could to avoid them because of how much damage I could do to that child. Why, if they are, actually malevolent, or they're not, if they are non-hostile, that would explain why they don't do anything to us. If it's reverse engineered technology, or if it's our technology and it's our people, that would also explain why they didn't do anything. So, it bodes okay either way. But yeah, it's a question that definitely is staying in the philosophical realm, because I don't think there's a good solid answer for it until we understand and identify the actual objects themselves.
So here's one for PJ. One of the listeners has mentioned that the UAP Task Force will apparently have more power than ATIP did. But do you think these programs could just get closed out of things like Lou was back in the ATIP days, potentially? Or do you think they're going to be allowed to actually do some digging and make any real progress?
I don't doubt that there's going to be stuff they don't have access to. It's the way the government works. It's the way the military works. I know a secret. You don't. You don't need to know the secret that I know, so I'm not going to tell you. I may have a top secret clearance, but that doesn't mean I can know every top secret item in the government. Just because the UAP Task Force is given a top secret clearance for access to top secret information doesn't mean they're going to get to know everything. Say a cruiser, I'm just going to use the Princeton, sees this again. That UAP Task Force isn't going to know the Princeton saw the objects again unless somebody tells them, unless there's a reporting process. And the government and military is too big of a bureaucracy to get all that stuff to work the way they really want it to.
Would you agree with that, Gary?
Yeah, the only thing I'd really add to that is the simple fact that, I mean, just go to a simple FOIA request. Unless you specifically ask exactly in the right exact words and terminology for what you want from them, they'll give you bullshit back. So unless they know the exact questions to ask, they may never get the right information.
One of the listeners wanted to know what level of disclosure or admission would it take for these events to make it into school textbooks?
Wow, that's a freaking awesome question. I think, oddly, UAPX expedition. When we go out there and we record these things and some really smart people stand up and say, this is what I saw and here's my proof, I don't think there will be any option at that point. It'll have to be acknowledged. That's the whole point of our mission, I think.
You're filing that then under the scientific, side of things, aren't you? That this is science, this is science fact. Here's the data, here's the experiments we've done, and here's the results off the back of it. So it's irrefutable proof then, yeah?
Yep, exactly. And over to you to tell us what we saw. That's the whole idea. We're going to gather all this data and then give it to some other really smart people to tell us what we just saw. Yeah, it will make the school books. It will make the history books. And I think that deep down inside, I think that it is going to end up changing the world. I really do.
I think for some of us, it has changed the world, and even for guys like you, it's affected your life. So yeah, I think we're starting to see that kind of the cracks appearing in a really good way. Gary, the next question was for you. How certain are you that the object you saw through the big eyes were the ones being tracked on radar, and did you see any movement?
I'm 100% certain that the objects that I saw were, as far as out we were, and that the range and bearing that they were at, it couldn't have been anything else. Timing was perfect. I mean, we're only talking a difference of minutes from the time I go from combat to up to the big eyes. So, I mean, it's not a whole lot of time. So, not unless every single time the same exact object just happened to be there at the same elevation and bearing every single time I went to go look at it, and granted, even half the time we were too far away from them, so to see them half the time. So when I did get to see them, and anytime they did move, it depends on the angle that we were at versus where they were at and which way, what vector that they went at. So if they were going, parallel with us, I could see them move. But if they were going, toward us, then, other than see them get a little bit brighter or just disappear, that was basically all I could see through the big eyes. It wasn't until I saw the video itself that I really got the good eyeball full of exactly what this thing I've been looking at through the big eyes really looked like. So, it's to me, I'm 100% certain the things I saw through the big eyes were exactly what we were tracking.
It was funny though that the way different people would think about these incidents, because Jeremy McGowan mentioned when I interviewed him that until he spoke to Lou Elizondo about the incident that had happened years before in the middle of the desert in Jordan, he thought it was one object in the sky that was repeating the same cycle. And apparently it wasn't until Luis Elizondo asked him, is there any chance that these were multiple objects just following the same path, that he actually had that idea that, maybe these were multiple contacts that I was seeing. And I mean, it could have been one object repeating, but then again, it could have been more. So, but you're quite certain that it was more than likely multiple, yeah?
Yeah, because we were tracking them at the same time. Generally, if it was one object and it was just disappearing and then reappearing because of how fast it was going, and basically we were just getting a hit every fifth time on them, and that's why it seemed like it was just disappearing. We wouldn't be tracking solid objects across the board, and being able to see the path of these objects. Because you remember when we first started tracking them, they weren't going fast at all. Matter of fact, they were doing the opposite of that. They were only doing 100 knots, which is ridiculously slow for a flying object. So, I mean, that in itself was just odd. So, I mean, they were not going amazingly fast we were able to track them. They were, luckily for us, very solid objects. Even after we decided that they couldn't be real, and then tried to see if there was anything wrong with our systems, there was nothing wrong with our systems. So when we brought them all back up, sure enough, they were all still there. So it was it was definitely 100% a real solid multiple objects. There's no way that I think I have no understanding of anything that would be capable of faking the tracks that we saw at the time in 2004. I know people have brought up other systems, but just looking how those systems work, there's no way they could have spoofed our system.
Even a gigantic flock of really cold seagulls or birds would not.
Even if they were hypersonic seagulls shitting fucking rockets, they wouldn't have fucking gotten through our system.
I'm just starting to believe the hypersonic seagull theory. So let's.
I tell you what, the first time I see a fucking hypersonic seagull, I'll be happy.
Well, I've also
Andy, one of the skill sets. One of the skill sets for operations specialists is exactly what you were asking about, being able to correlate what we see on radar with what the lookouts, in this case Gary and I, saw visually with our eyeballs. So, one of my skill sets, been doing it for 18 years at the time, and I'm absolutely 110% positive that what I saw on radar was exactly the object I saw through the big eyes. And when I saw it, it was actually pretty boring, and I was disappointed and went back down to combat.
I was disappointed, but I was excited I found it.
Yeah, some of the watchstanders actually saw these things maneuver with their eyes, some of the bridge watchstanders and stuff. Sean Cahill being one of them. Our buddy Sean Cahill.
Yeah, I spoke to Sean Cahill about that back in the second episode.
Not that I don't love having Patrick here, but I was actually really looking forward to actually doing an interview with him. I've had a couple of conversations with him privately, and other than that, he's a real interesting cat. Definitely somebody I want to get to know even more than I know, because even him as on board being a higher rank and me other being a lower rank, other than running into him from time to time, you don't have a whole lot of personal interaction with people with him. Like me and Kevin, other than I knew of him. He was a regular watchstander, so I've had conversations with him prior. But he was a chief. I was a junior enlisted. We were not the same. So it's a whole different animal. We're now, when we speak to each other, it's with mutual respect. But back then it's, you're my junior, you do what I need you to do, and you don't need to know anything else.
That's probably how I feel talking to you guys just now. So yeah, but let's next question I will throw out to the floor. Was Chad Underwood directed to the Tic Tac by the Princeton radar, or did he find it on Commander Fravor's direction alone?
I think Kevin would have to pick that up. Kevin, what they want to know is, did you guide him into the area, or was he guided in by our flight control, or was he told to go there by Fravor?
Fravor was low on fuel, so he had to return to base, RTB back on the carrier, and Chad Underwood was getting ready to take off for the next flight, and Favor's like, "Hey Chad, don't forget to take an ATFLIR plane so you can film this thing. Go find them." And reportedly, Underwood replied by saying, "I'm going to go find those things." Jumped in his airplane, took off, and went out there and found them. He came up on Charlie Control, our air intercept control, and we took control of his flight and made sure he went to the right spot in the sky where he found him.
So basically, what you're saying is that Fravor's involvement was to the point of making sure that Chad had the ATFLIR pod on his aircraft before he launched. And then we were the ones that guided him into that area. And from there, he takes it from there to go look for the objects. We gave him relative bearing and direction, and then he goes and gets the eyes on.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a forward-looking infrared radar. That ATFLIR forward-looking infrared radar.
Hopefully that breaks it down a little bit better for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And the next question is along the similar path, but it was actually for Patrick, for PJ. It was asked on Twitter, and I think he said he would talk about it as much as he could when he came on the show. So a lot of debunkers have questioned the capabilities of the FLIR and radar. Can you talk, where possible, on what these systems are actually capable of?
Oh, I'm not going to talk about FLIR because I'm not a FLIR guy. But as far as the radar on the Hawkeye, which we tracked, and I'll let Gary speak on SPY, the way the radars work, and there's multiple radars in use. There's a SPY, there's the Hawkeye radar, the fighter radars, the Nimitz radars. All of these radars have different capabilities, different ranges, different power, different, processors. They all work differently, and they were all giving us the same information. The way the radar on the Hawkeye particularly worked is it's got inbuilt processing. It was an older radar, but a very modern processor. It's designed to look for that stuff. We used to play games with the Prowlers, which are jamming aircraft, which are meant to jam aircraft, jam radar specifically, and they rarely were able to jam the Hawkeye's radar because the way the radar is designed to work. I can't elaborate on all of them because a lot of that portion is classified, but it's designed to not get spoofed. And the Hawkeye radar can be spoofed if you're really good and you know what you're doing. But Gary's radar, you're not spoofing. His radar has way too many antennas, way too many. I'll let Gary speak on that, but you're not fooling that radar. You're not fooling this many different radars in use. If it was just one radar, I could understand the whole spoofing line of thought. But when you have this many radars in use, I don't believe it. Gary, you want to speak on SPY?
Yeah. Well, with SPY, I mean, it's not really one radar. You got to remember, each one of those hexagonal panels you see has X amount of feed horns, and each one of those feed horns can be moved in any particular direction that we want, and we can actually track multiple objects, which is one panel or all of the panels. All the panels combined together make a 360-degree view. We can do things like burn through, which is where we crank up the power and we just basically focus everything on one spot, and basically it overpowers another radar and for effective purposes jams it. But mostly it just keeps them from being able to use their radar on us. And then we can also do things like use it as a FCS controller. Basically, we have a different type of radar dish on board called it's a fire control. It's where it's when you hear like on movies where they say light up the target or paint the target. What they're actually talking about is using RF energy and bouncing it off of a specific target so that we can shoot a missile at it. Now, the missile itself interacts with the target because of how much RF is bouncing off of it. It's the most radiant RF object in the area, so it hits that target. Well, we can do that with SPY. We can do that with multiple objects with SPY. SPY was even then the most powerful radar on the planet. Until somebody develops quantum radars for actual practical use, and not just the prototype that you've seen on the internet. And when you actually dig into it, their prototype is very, very weak. And until quantum radars are in effect, there will be nothing that could spoof a SPY radar.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Gary. And thank you, PJ. Kevin, next question was for yourself, and there's a follow-up for Gary too on the back of it. And I can ask PJ the same if it's relevant. What was the most amazing thing about the footage you've seen regarding the Tic Tac?
The most amazing thing for me is the fact that it still survived. I was actually down at the golf course. I had forgotten all about this, even though, because I didn't relate at all what happened to me after I retired and stuff, and I didn't relate it back to this event. As it turns out, that it was the cause of what some of the stuff I was going through, and I just didn't. I mean, how the hell are you going to figure something like that out? I mean, you know what I mean? And I had forgotten all about it. I published my book, went on in life, and forgot about this. I was down at the golf course. I had just reopened the kitchen, and I was watching a golf tournament, and all of a sudden CNN's on. Who the hell turned on CNN? And then I saw what was playing. It was that freaking video that I had in my email within hours of this event actually happening. And it was the exact same fuzzy video. And I was so freaking shocked. I dropped the plate of fish and chips and yelled out to my brother-in-law in the pro shop, "Hey, Dave, I got to go home. I'll explain later." I took off, went home, got on the internet, and Robert Powell had already posted something. He's from the Scientific Coalition Ufology. I said, "Hey, Robert, this is Kevin Day. We've never met, but you got to call me. I'm the guy that was sitting on the radar when this happened and controlled the intercept." And that's when it all started happening for me. So for me, the most amazing thing about this is the fact that we're even talking about this right now. I never expected this to happen ever in a million years. I really didn't. Gary, you feel the same way? I mean, I'd moved on.
Oh, Gary, you're
Hello.
still-
Well, I hadn't moved on. I never moved on. I've always had my private studies about what we saw. For as much as that's ever going to get me, but I've always tried to figure out what they are, how they worked, what kind of propulsion that they used, what kind of how it could be possible for those objects to have done what they could do. These are the questions that have basically made my head hurt for almost 20 years now. So, yeah.
And Gary, your follow-up on that one was, is it possible that what Gary saw in the longer Tic Tac video was a different event to the Chad Underwood film?
From what I understand, no. But then again, I'm also hearing that that there is a possibility that they have multiple films from multiple planes that were in the air. I think that I think the rest of the films are all gun footage films from the gun cameras and not from the FLIR pods. But what I saw was basically, from what I understand, he was the only one with an FLIR pod, so it would have had to been his same footage. But there is a possibility. I didn't see like a label. It didn't say Underwood on the screen or anything like that, nor was I really paying attention to that part of the screen. I was pretty much eyes locked on the object that was, the focus of this video. So any of the data that was running along the edges of the screen, which was a lot of data, I wouldn't have remembered exactly what it said. So the only thing I remember is just how numb my brain went seeing this object.
Next question, again, I'll put out to whoever it's more relevant to answer, but you can all come in, of course. Did the craft seen underwater also head to Catalina Islands? And did any of you see the Tic Tacs enter the water when they reached the islands as well?
I didn't. In fact, when this happened, it wasn't my situational awareness whatsoever. Anything went into the water. I saw this thing drop from 28,000 feet on radar down to 50 feet and just hover there. Now, others have testimony saying these objects went into the water, and you know what? That's their testimony, and at some point, maybe some evidence will come out, the same as it's coming out now with the different radar systems and other witnesses coming forward. Maybe that same thing will happen with the subsurface contact too. Gary,
well, I know
you're a lot more intimate than me with this question, so go for it.
All right, so I know that the pilots reported seeing a very large object underwater, and that the Tic Tacs were interacting with that object. So we do have one confirmed report of at least one object being underwater. Direction, bearing, I have no idea which way it went. I know that it wasn't there at a certain point. And then the like in the unidentified episode where they had my interview, they got me on film saying, they had a track that was over 500 knots under the water. But what they cut off that and so nicely edited was the fact that I literally said prior to that and after the comment that it was told to me by another sailor, which I have yet to be able to get a hold of and verify this for 100%. I've had one of the other sonar technicians that I do know and trust kind of tell me something contradictory, that if there were tracks, it wasn't from the Princeton. I know that for a fact. The Princeton didn't track it underwater in any way, shape, or form. That if there were underwater tracks, it would have had to come from either the sub, the carrier, or some other ship that was in the area. We did not have our sonar buoys out. We didn't have our tail in the water, which means that it's a long sonar buoy tail that we drag so that we can triangulate and track objects through the water. And that's the only way we would have been able to have known what the speed of something was with sonar. So because we didn't have that tail in the water, the Princeton would never have been able to tell you whether it was 500 knots into the water. So if that information was accurate that I received from right now, I'm not going to name the source, but it would have had to have come from one of the other ships in the battle group.
Awesome.
But it's still unconfirmed. So, I mean, take it for what you will. I personally believe it, but I have zero proof. I'll be dead honest with that. Until I can get the particular person that told me about it to come out about it, I have zero proof. So take it with a grain of salt until we have better proof.
No, I appreciate that. Listen, so the next question is one of the longer ones. It was sent over by Jazz Shaw, who many will know from UFO Twitter. I'll read through it, and you might want to take some notes. So some of us have recently been reviewing the original Nimitz encounter interviews with a specific focus on gaining some perspective on the two individuals who showed up to collect the data bricks after the encounter. PG, I know this is something you've talked on. I asked this question as a former radar tech who served on 2 carriers out of San Diego back in the day. I was always in CIC, so I don't shy away from the geek talk. And for those I've been speaking to the guys about on the show and the listeners, this is some of the language that I was like, what? So I'm hoping the guys will understand this, and I'm sure they will. In some of those interviews, Gary Voorhis described them as 2 guys in suits. I'm assuming he meant jumpsuits or whatever uniform or clothes they had on underneath. The interviewer seemed to later interpret this as meaning they might be civilians, but that wasn't clear from the original answer. Jason Turner has said he doesn't remember seeing the helicopters land and didn't see them. And I'm going to butcher the surname here potentially, but is it Ryan Viegelt? Originally described them as a couple of Air Force guys in plain flight suits, later saying they are plain green flight suits with no names or insignia. Doesn't say how he knew they were Air Force, but later says absolutely Air Force, based on a glimpse of the uniforms he could see under the jumpsuits. With no offence intended, I've worn those jumpsuits for helo trips between ships and from ship to shore. They don't show a lot of your uniform. That's an awfully tiny detail to remember 15 years later, when you say that you originally didn't find the encounter all that interesting until other people came forward. Wondering what level of certainty we have that they were definitely Air Force and not Navy, or possibly even civilian government that came on board. It doesn't take that long to fly out from Coronado out to that operating area, and I would like to ask what the guys think potentially about this situation. And by the way, I served on the Connie and Ranger out of North Point and was a TAD to the Kitty Hawk a couple of times. Say hi to my fellow squids for me. That was a bit of a longer question, but PJ, you might want to come in on that one, I think.
Yeah, I know Gary's got his own part because our experiences are the same but different. You know, I understand what the gentleman is saying. You know, when they get off the helicopter, they have rubber duckies on, they have a helmet on, they have goggles on. It covers up all that stuff. Rubber ducky being a life jacket, a life preserver. By the time they made it to me, they didn't have any of that stuff off or on. They just had their flight suits. A Navy flight suit is green, an Air Force flight suit is green. But the insignia, the patches, the color of the ranks, all of that is different. And we get taught that in boot camp. You know, that's how ingrained it is in you to recognize the other services insignia. They definitely had, at least on my end, on the Nimitz, Air Force flight suits. They were lower ranking. I don't remember the rank, but they were Air Force flight suits. They had Air Force patches, Air Force insignia, all of that. And being a Navy ship, you don't exactly have Air Force officers on there all the time. They stand out. You know, that's something that you remember that they were there. And where my shop was on the Nimitz, it's a hike to get there. You got to go up some and down some and around some corners. It's not a straight shot just to get to us. So if they're making it all the way over to where I am, it's something I remembered. Gary?
Well, our guys that came over to our ship, it could be anything from, I keep getting interviews where they talk about the men in black that came to my ship, and I always correct them and say, "Oh, you mean the men in khaki?" Because they, we're talking polo shirts, khakis. We'll say semi business formal, or not formal, just business casual type of attire. Unlike PJ, I actually had to sign the chain of custody, which is actually the only thing I signed about this entire event. And that's actually why I got a little confused when I first, I had to make sure that wasn't a non-disclosure agreement I signed, because I up to that point, I had literally never signed a chain of custody in my entire life, because we'd never given anything out other than tapes to tech reps and things of that nature, which didn't require a chain of custody. But I did sign a chain of custody for our data recording tapes. So there is at least a paper trail somewhere, just not one that we can follow.
Awesome. Thank you. Guys, just a couple more questions and then we can wrap up. I appreciate the time. Kevin, this next one is for you. Did an officer give you instruction to investigate the radar anomalies?
No, as a matter of fact, after this happened, I went up to Combat Information Center, CSC, and I was going to, I didn't know how the captain was going to react, but I was going to draft an after-action message, because I was the primary operational message writer for the ship. And then, I'd write the message, and then I would route it through the chain of command, and the captain would end up releasing it. Because of the way he was acting, I pulled him off to the side. "Hey, Captain Smith, what's going on here? What are these objects?" And he looked at me with a very perplexed look and said, "I don't know, maybe ice, spontaneous forming ice from space," he said. And I have to admit, laughing out loud, and I'm glad he didn't get mad at me for it, but I actually laughed at him. Okay. So the next day I went up to combat. I was going to draft a message after action report, and I didn't know if he was going to release it or not, but I was going to try. And I went over to to get my data and stuff. I went over to the RD-390, which recorded all of our external communications on the radios.
Which is already deleted.
And lo and behold, all of my voice comms were gone.
You're welcome.
Every time we key the mic on the external, it gets recorded. The date time, it gives a date time stamp, and then the follow-on voice comms. Well, strangely enough, all the date time stamps were on the disk still, but all the comms were gone.
Yep.
And I looked at the technician, and I could tell that he knew what had happened. And I'm not going to mention his name because he hasn't come out yet. But I just gathered instinctively that he knew, but he couldn't tell me, and I respected that. And I gave up the idea of writing a message at that point. Because I had figured out that something very strange had happened, and it was way beyond my pay grade to figure it out. So I just left it alone.
Because what Kevin didn't know is while he was doing all that with the captain and trying to figure out how to report this, I was turning over data tapes and being instructed to erase everything.
Yeah, I figured all that out later. Yeah.
And, and ironically, I didn't know that he was the one that accessed the data afterwards until we told our stories separately later on. And I was thinking, it's like we were literally in the same room. The first time I heard it, we were on stage over in Laughlin. And I'm like, oh my God, I am the asshole that erased that on him.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah. So
yeah, it was truly a head scratcher. And, I had 18, there was only one guy on the ship that had more sea time than me, was the captain. I had 18 years of sea time on Ticonderoga class ships that day when that happened. And I had never experienced anything like this. Usually when we do exercises and operations, everything's been scripted months in advance and practiced and rehearsed and repracticed and debriefed and briefed and debriefed. This thing was so far outside of the realm of anything I'd ever seen. I didn't know what to do. So I didn't do anything.
And Kevin, the next question again is for you. Was it yourself who guided Chad Underwood during the filming of the FLIR video, or was it a colleague?
Restate the question. It was a little bit broken.
Was it yourself that guided Chad Underwood during the filming of the FLIR video, or was it a colleague of yours?
That FLIR video that we see on the internet is from Chad Underwood's flight. Is that what you're asking?
No,
it didn't come from the ship.
That's not quite what they're asking. What they're asking is whether you guided him in exactly to where the object was to film it. He would have guided him to the area, like the general area where it was, and then Chad would have done his own interrogation from that point on.
Yeah, awesome. And you have to remember we got data links too, so he can look out his systems in the aircraft and see where he's supposed to go as well from the data links.
Cool. Next question to the floor. If the Tic Tac was sending or receiving electromagnetic signals, could Hawkeye discern directionally where the origin of the data was coming from?
Yes.
Oh, sure. There you go. Yes, you can. 100% yes. And actually, if it was squawking anything, just about, if it was, depending on what frequency it was, a lot of the ships could have seen it, in Hawkeye specifically, because, well, that's literally what it's there for.
And Andy, just so you know, when during operations on the ship, like the radar operator will say, new track 4425, and then everybody in a position on the air side is going to chime in with their own piece of information. And one of those guys is the electronic warfare supervisor. And he is specifically looking for that. He's looking for signals coming from that contact, because with his information, I'm able to tell, hey, this is a ComAir because it's got ComAir radar. Or, hey, this is a Soviet MiG-25 because it's got that type of signature. So I use all of these little pieces of information to make the identification.
And that's where the problem we found.
In this case,
is we couldn't figure out what it was.
There was no electronic emissions from these things.
Because I mean, everybody wants to look at this stuff and say, okay, well, there could have been, a person that made a mistake. Well, it doesn't matter if a person made a mistake. The entire battle group didn't make a mistake, and there's so much information that we're using to try to figure out exactly what these objects are. Is that it's honestly, it just it feels like anybody that's really trying to debunk it based off of that fact about us not being trained enough or somebody making a mistake, it feels like they're just trying to make a sensational accusation. Because if you knew the way that this stuff works, and that's what we're trying to relay to people, is that there's no way we made a mistake that this was an unknown object. There was no way we made a mistake that it was a solid object. There's no way that we made a mistake about how fast it went or the capabilities of it. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking to you right now. If we didn't believe it, and we wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't real, then the government definitely wouldn't have said anything at all. They would have just been like, yeah, sure, believe what you want to believe, just like they have for the last 60 years. But instead, they had their hand pulled this time. Yeah, it's really hard to deny the video evidence that we put forward, and then from there, we can testify the rest. We've got video, we've got radar, we've got, audio, we've got the pilots themselves. I don't know how much more people want. At this point, either get on board or get the hell out, have to get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, that's fair.
Send us some money to go figure it out more.
Give us enough money, I'll take you with us.
Yeah, we will. Help fund us, and we'll go out there and we'll figure this shit out. It's that simple.
If you just
Go ahead,
advertise
sorry.
a CE5 experience for $2,500, you'll get a few people jumping on board, I'm sure, as well. So
I can flog them or waterboard them or something, and they can hallucinate it if they want.
I think there's places. I think there's places you can go for that kind of stuff anyway. So 2 more questions. Do you guys know of others? And I'm sure you will. And can you give an estimate of what sort of numbers of people have had similar experiences to yourselves that just haven't came public yet? And any details at all you can share.
Well, to give you an idea, since I went public with this, I've probably had just personally over at least 100 different people of credible nature, whether they're pilots, prior military, with top secret clearances. Mostly, I'll be honest with you, mostly pilots, commercial pilots and military pilots. I've gotten over 100 emails depicting various from back in the, back in the 50s and 60s. I've got some guys that won't come public about it, but definitely wanted me to know the story and that I'm not alone, in that kind of situation. And I know that the other guys have all received emails from people, and of course I take everything with a grain of salt until I kind of look into things. But I'm appreciative of any of the stories that anybody wants to share with us. But I think, without a shadow of a doubt, there's not a day that doesn't go by that a new witness is not created. So I'm thinking every single day a pilot sees something, a credible witness sees something that they can't explain running through the skies. I think it's that common, and I think that's why it permeates our society so thoroughly.
Well said, Gary. And I agree with all that.
Awesome. Next question. I had a few people ask this one. I know it's something that we talked about just before the show as well. Have you got any comments on Deep Prasad and his time with UAPX?
Well, good kid. You should get off of Twitter so much, and we don't have anything other really to say about him. That's there's not much to say about him. He was with us for a while. We hadn't really done anything yet before we separated. He didn't particularly like how we monitored his social media, so he left the company, and that's our official statement as UAPX.
No. Yeah, the whole reason why all this started, it actually goes back to him in an article that Tim McMillan wrote. They called the group, what was it, the Silicon Valley UFO Hunters, right, Gary?
Yeah.
And that's when I was the first one to reach out to Deep. Say, hey, Deep, this is me, and I'm the guy that you need to talk to. And that's how he kind of came to join us. And it's unfortunate.
Like I said,
what
that's
happened.
That's all we're going to talk about him. We had our official statement, and that's it.
Yeah, I know that.
Exactly right.
And thank you for making the statement as well. I appreciate you answering that. Last question, and I'm looking for an answer here from all of you. With the UAP Task Force now being formed and underway, are we going to find out within the next, I'll give an estimate here, 2 to 3 years, that these unidentified craft have an origin that is not of this earth, if I word it that way?
I know.
I missed that. The dog is barking.
Basically, they want to know if hopefully here soon we'll find out whether these are aliens or not. I know Kevin hopes they are. I just I'm scared no matter which way it goes. I'll be dead honest. All of this shit scares the hell out of me because I don't see a good direction that this is going into. And if I'm completely wrong and it actually goes in the direction where they're just these people that have lived here and they're just helping us, I will gladly eat crow.
PJ, do you want to come in on that?
I don't know if they're going to get anywhere anytime soon. They've got a lot of work to do just to catch up to where everything is.
And Kevin?
Man, this universe of ours is so freaking huge. The odds that we are the only living, when I say we, I'm including every like even like mosquitoes and stuff, like every living organism on our planet, the chances that we are the only living organism in the entire universe has to be zil. It has to be zero. In fact, the opposite has to be true. Now, that's not to say that they even care about us or they're the ones visiting us or that's what we saw. But I honestly don't believe that we're alone in this universe. In my mind, is scientifically impossible. It just is. There's no freaking way that's going to prove true.
No, I agree, Kevin. And you say this universe, and that discounts the other universes that may be out there as well. And I'll leave that one just there. But listen, gents, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all. I thank you very much for your time. Thank you to all the listeners for sending in your questions as well. It's a brand new format I've been trying, and hopefully it'll get better and better each time. But I think I'll struggle to get 3 guests of the same caliber. And again, PJ, special thanks to filling in so late as well for Sean, who couldn't make the show.
Hey, Andy, let's do this again. And Andy, bring in other people on the team, like Kevin Knuth, a professor from the university out in New York, Bruce Mackbee. In other words, I want to get the scientists and the physicists during the next meeting.
A good one would have is,
in addition to
Kevin Knuth on here. That's he'd be a real good interview. The guy's got a wonderful mind.
Oh my God, he's brilliant. There ain't no doubt about it. Yep.
Any of that
Absolutely
would be great.
Brilliant.
And listen, a lot of people want to hear from you as well, and that's UAPX getting started up and really getting going too. So we look forward to all of that. So gents, just again, thank you very much from me.
That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO Podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO Podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little Baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a Voorhis. Meditative game of fate full on meta. Can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. I'm like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think I be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? But for being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life, consider your eyes. It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer. It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer.